freight efficiency with NACV's Mike Roth and Friends.
In episode 134, we have joining us Dakota Semler. He's Chief Amazement Officer at Xos Trucks, where he talks about his 10 years at the company, why the company pivoted to medium-duty trucks, and the company's focus on markets that were going to grow and see tremendous conversion in zero-emission vehicles in the near term. We also talk about how he got into trucking, how he pivoted into electric vehicles, and the beauty of the simplicity of BEVs. He shares information on the Xos-Windrose collaboration and talks about the importance of constantly learning. Today we have joining us Dakota Semler. He's Chief Amazement Officer with Xos Trucks. Glad you're joining me today, Dakota. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me.
Yeah, so we've known each other for quite a while. You can't be on the podcast unless you're a friend, and we have to state how and when we met. So do you remember?
I think I do, and I'm more excited that I can tell my wife that I have a friend now.
At least one.
Yeah, at least one. No, I think it was when we first started out with our Class 8 truck, probably almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, my wife and I were out with our daughter for 4 or 5 months, and she lived in Burbank. And I think I called you guys because I was like, all of a sudden I hear that there's a startup in Burbank, California, and I could walk to it from my daughter's apartment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I gotta see this. So I don't know if I met you that day or if it was just Geo or what, but and that would have been the fall of 2016. So yeah, 10 years ago.
It was a long time ago, but we're working on some fun, exciting stuff back then, probably way before this entire industry had, matured and materialized into what it is today. And I think you and your wife and your daughter went and did a tour after that on
We did.
our tour company.
Yeah, we did. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much for reminding me. That was a safari in Malibu. Very fun. Very fun. All right. So tell me, these 10 years, have they gone fast or have they gone slow?
I think a little bit of both. It's interesting to see how this space has evolved over the last 10 years. You may remember this, but we started actually in the Class 8 space, and we built a big prototype electric tractor that we took around the country, and we went to Memphis and we visited FedEx and we took it to Pepsi in Texas and all these big fleets. And we kind of did it as a big voice of the customer to understand what customers were looking for in electrifying their fleets. And that was probably one of the most insightful trips that I have ever taken because we got tremendous feedback from customers sharing what they thought, what their concerns were, where the limitations of the technology were going to be, and how that would apply into their different operational use cases. And one of the biggest takeaways we learned from that trip was the nascency of EV charging infrastructure, particularly for heavy duty vehicles. And it actually was so significant of a hurdle that we pivoted and we began focusing squarely on medium duty trucks. The battery sizes are smaller, the charging speeds were generally lower. You don't do as much slip seating or team driving. They're generally returning to the same depot every night. And infrastructure for level 2 charging or even, low powered level 3 DC fast charging was already pretty prevalent and existed and very approachable. And we got some really good feedback from UPS being one of the key customers there that said, if you guys can build us an electric package car, we would switch over a big portion of the fleet. And other fleets like FedEx also said similar things. And so we really shifted our focus to focus on markets that were going to grow and see tremendous conversion to zero emissions in the near term future. But in the last 10 years, a lot of those challenges around heavy duty charging have been solved. And specifically for certain use cases, right? When you think of drayage or you think of regional haul or last mile delivery using tractors, there is a ton of infrastructure work that has been done from public charging sites to, just higher power chargers that really make Class 8 electrification also possible now too.
Yeah, it reminds me, for me personally, I remember, and maybe it was during those early days that you're talking about, but I remember thinking, come on, I've been in this business a long time. no way will batteries haul freight, and then, I'm like, I said I'd call bullshit on that many times. And then pretty quickly, I'm like, well, wait a minute, there's lots of reasons why these diesel trucks have become hard to love. I mean, when fleets say, diesel, we know and love them, I say, well, we know them, but if we're really honest, we don't love them. And there's lots of challenges and stuff. But I remember, almost going full circle saying, well, maybe this isn't as hard as we think. And then thinking, nah, wait a minute, this is truly a transformation. This has got huge differences in, fueling versus charging you're bringing up, and maintenance and repair and lots of things. So, then I was having like a aha moment as well as you guys. Well, let's start with the easier try. I mean, we got delivery vans, class 3, 4, 5, package cars, 4, 5, and 6. Let's start there. That seems like a much, and let us learn. We don't need to solve all of these use cases right away 10 years ago. And I think that's what's helped us. We figured, okay, well, here's slow charging, if you will, and then here's faster, and now we're talking 1.2 megawatts. Wow. But we've learned from different phases, different use cases, yard tractors, etc. That's really created that snowball effect, I think.
Yeah, I remember when we first started talking to you about, I think it was the first run on less, most of the vehicles in that were diesel or CNG or some sort of ICE vehicle, and we were going to be one of the first EVs in it. And then I remember, fast forward a few years later, and it was run on less electric depot charging, and it's
Yeah.
evolved as the technologies
Yeah.
come along, as the fueling infrastructure has come along, and I think a lot of us, are surprised to see how quickly it's evolved.
Yeah. So before we dive in, because I got a lot of questions around, what Exos has become and is happening and so forth. But I always like, because there's just so much interesting stories about how different people found their way into trucking. The classic old school is they were a mechanic and, in a shop, and then they ended up working their way through to, white collar jobs and this, that, and the other. But I'm really fascinated now that the industry's bigger. It's broader than it was just a few years ago. But so, what's your story? How
Yeah.
did you get here, and why did you stay here?
So I am not a mechanic. I'm probably one of the least mechanically inclined people you'll ever meet, but no, I'm only joking. I actually got here because my family was in the business. So I grew up on a farm and grew up around heavy equipment, tractors and trucks. And one of the businesses that my dad had was actually a materials hauling fleet here in Southern California. And we had about 200 trucks, probably almost 300 trailer sets,
Wow.
mostly bottom dumps, end dumps, Super 10s, and we had a few pneumatic trailers, and we had a couple of tandem freight trailers as well for some dedicated routes. And so I actually, as a summer job, I started, and I was, before I even had my driver's license, I was working at that yard. I'd drive out with my dad and I would work. We had a yard in Fontana originally, and then eventually it moved to Riverside. And I would move trucks around. I would help just do odd jobs and just got really interested in the business. And at the time, I was actually thinking about converting our entire fleet to running on biodiesel and trying to start a biodiesel business to solve some of the emissions challenges that they were facing in complying with the new Prop 1B rules and the new diesel emissions regulations on Class 8 trucks.
Hmm.
And I realized, the fuel isn't going to help meet a lot of those NOx standards and the new emission standards pretty quickly. And that thought never really went away from me. So after I finished school and I started my own fleet, I was having similar problems with the newer diesel engines. It was originally not EGR, but the DEF systems were not super reliable. And when it came to SCR systems, they were even more faulty, the first generation of systems. And so we stopped buying diesel vehicles altogether. And I kept having this thought that was coming back in my mind of, somebody's going to figure out how to electrify these trucks. And in our case, both in my dad's fleet and in my fleet that I started, we were never doing more than 150, 200 miles a day. And so it really seemed like the battery technology that existed even in passenger cars could be used to solve the challenge in commercial vehicles. And as you know, fuel is one of the biggest things that costs fleets money. It's one of the biggest operating costs. So I was really keen to explore how you could save a fleet money by switching to a lower cost form of energy. And we just kind of got curious, and Gio, who's my co-founder and our COO, he, was exploring this business with me. And probably about 10 or 11 years ago, we started looking into it. We asked professors and all kinds of academics as to whether it was possible, and fleets, whether they would consider it. And I think pretty much everybody we talked to said, no, it wasn't possible and you shouldn't do it. And
I might have been one of those.
and against their better wisdom, I think we felt that there was a compelling enough reason to do it. Not only could we be solving a problem for our own fleet, or the fleet that I was running at the time, but we could also potentially be starting another business that can save other fleet operators on their operational costs. And at the same time, you're doing something good for the world, doing something good for the air. And that felt good enough to try and pursue, and interesting enough for us to pick as a problem to solve. So that's how we pivoted into building electric vehicles.
And I keep coming back to, and I'm, how simple the basic configuration and the architecture of battery electric vehicle. Rarely does simple not win. Now, these components are expensive and they're new, and we got to figure out how they survive on 1,000,000 miles on heavy duty truck or 500,000 miles on a smaller truck. But basically, it's, if there's a simple solution, you can't ignore it, because it tends to win out. And that's the way I view that battery electric against all of these other configurations.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is by far the simplest powertrain architecture that exists out there, avoiding transmissions that you have to utilize in any kind of internal combustion engine, obviously avoiding the complexity of fuel cells and high pressure storage tanks. BEVs are truly simple, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. They're still complex engineered systems to ensure that you can achieve the reliability and the durability that customers expect, and the safety requirements that our federal motor vehicle safety standards dictate and other standards dictate. But at the end of the day, the core architecture is so simple and really avoids a lot of the maintenance prone processes that are associated with internal combustion engines, right? You don't have
Yeah. Yeah.
ton of mechanical linkages and gears and systems that need lubrication and filtration all the time.
I got to tell you, Dakota, I'm a little confused. Sometimes I look at you as like an energy company, a portable charger company, a truck company. I mean, what is it? Some of the above, all the above, or are you just morphing and changing so much it's kind of confusing?
Yeah, it's a good question. We really focus on where can we create value for our customers. And I think we've figured out that there are a few areas that we've created some really unique products that we've decided to pursue in addition to, electrifying commercial vehicles. So we started out building strip chassis probably about 8 years ago after we engineered our first platform. And we've delivered, thousands of those units on the road, operating across the country, and in Canada. And we've had great success with that program and delivering those vehicles. And we've got pretty much, I think, 9 of the top 10 strip chassis fleets in the country are customers and continuing to buy from us. So that business has grown, and we've continued to drive costs out of the platform to get as close to diesel parity as possible, because that's what our customers want to see. But in building that business, we've also learned a tremendous amount about the industry and about related sectors. And one of the first things we did, actually, even before we got the step van certified, was we started taking our technology that we had developed and selling it to other OEMs. And so that powertrain business, which was pretty small for a couple of years, has continued to grow and build momentum. Um, and recently, we actually started working, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, started working with Bluebird School Bus, and they've become a really prominent customer in that business. And they're using our powertrains now to electrify their buses. So taking a lot of the learnings that we've built into the strip chassis platform and applying them to other commercial vehicle use cases that are also ripe for electrification.
Yeah, I'm gonna interrupt you. You guys just keep doing what I think is the right stuff. I mean, first of all, you're modest. You're not out there like yelling, screaming, and bragging all over the place. But this, I remember when I visited 10 years ago, you had this idea of selling powertrains. I mean, Cummins has sold only engines without building trucks and vehicles or bulldozers or anything for 100 and some years. Why can't somebody focus on the powertrain? And I'm glad to hear you're been successful with that, because I think that's it's not about only doing one thing; it's doing the things around that one thing that makes sense. That's congratulations on that. That's a good move.
Thank you. And I think, there's a lot that can be applied from these existing industries that we've learned about, like strip chassis, but there's a lot of systems engineering and applications engineering that goes into making the powertrain suited for the end market that you're selling it to. So we've done a lot of work with Bluebird and making sure that we can support them with bringing our V2G to market and in production now, and tailoring the software a bit to the school bus use case. And we hope to continue to grow that business. I think there's a lot of other short haul applications beyond just, step vans and school buses that also can benefit from it. And we've got some off-highway customers in that business as well that are continuing to grow with us. And then the third segment of the business is what we call our Xos Hub business. And it really stemmed out of a need that we saw about 4 or 5 years ago. So we were getting orders from customers, delivering trucks, and we'd deliver trucks and they would sit in a parking lot for months on end. Not because we weren't all making a great effort to get charging infrastructure deployed, but because the process of deploying charging infrastructure has become so complex in working with utilities, working with your local building authority, working with landlords of the buildings that our fleets were operating out of. There were so many different stakeholders that we saw that as a hurdle to being able to scale and grow our truck sales business. So we came up with a concept of, what if we just took a big battery, dropped it on a trailer, and paired it with some DC fast chargers. And that way you can effectively think of it as like a trickle charger, where you're trickle charging that battery from the existing grid power you have. And then you're allowing those DC fast chargers to charge vehicles in your yard. And we launched that product really just to help accelerate the truck sales business. And it did that. But we also saw that it was a very useful product for a lot of other passenger car fleets, light duty fleets, medium duty fleets that had never interacted with Xos before, that now had the same exact charging problem that we had been facing. So our biggest customers in that segment are no longer Xos truck customers buying step vans or strip chassis. It's companies like Waymo that are using them to charge their autonomous vehicles, or Caltrans using them to charge all their, passenger light duty fleet in depots across the state. It's investor-owned utilities like LADWP and Xcel Energy and Florida Power and Light, had to name a few. But really, it's a challenge that the industry is continuing to face, and we've seen it grow even in fixed charging applications where people are combining storage because the demands of power are becoming so large, not just from EV charging, but other industrial uses and other uses that are impacting the grid. So that's kind of the third segment of the business, and continuing to see that business grow as well.
Some of these seem like smaller segments. Are you worried at all that you're going to be, you know, too diversified?
It's a fair question, and I would actually go back to kind of what we view as our core strength inside of the company. So when you look at all these different segments, they look somewhat different, right? They're different end user applications, different sales and marketing models and go-to-market models, and different support mechanisms and SLAs. But under the hood, and forgive the kind of analogy, but under the hood, the core architecture and the core electronics that are going into these vehicles and each of these products is almost identical. When you look at a hub bill of materials and the hub software build and the hub electrical architecture relative to a step van strip chassis architecture, they're actually very similar. A lot of the same components, same software engineers working on them, same electrical engineers, battery engineers, thermal engineers. And so we think of it actually as not so much different business segments within the company. We have a single core engineering team that works across these different functions and develops these different products. They're really just different pathways to go to market.
Another thing I thought was brilliant was I think it's Iowa production facility where there was I think it was Ferguson, right, that was doing glider kit work, and that kind of came to an end with some changes at the EPA. I might have this story kind of right, kind of not right, but boy, you jumped in, Xos did, and kind of is that where you're building these trucks now? And it just seemed like a really good move for expertise that was existing in the
Yeah.
in the world that you could take advantage of. Good work.
Yeah, we really try to be practical with everything in the business and how we go to market, how we build things, how we engineer things. We don't want to overcomplicate things. And when we were first starting to build trucks in scale, we wanted to find a manufacturing partner that could help us scale, both to offset some of that manufacturing capex that's required to build out a big greenfield site, but also to take some of their expertise and knowledge and, hopefully somebody that had built trucks before. So we actually did this big RFP and we talked to a bunch of big contract manufacturers, and we landed on a group called Fitzgerald out of Tennessee. They were building glider kits for probably about 20 plus years. And for those, unfamiliar with the concept, it's essentially a pre-2010 model year engine that kind of predated the emissions regulations, could be put into a new truck chassis after it was remanufactured and not have to have DEF systems or SCR systems. And so it's actually a pretty rapidly growing market in the kind of 2010 timeframe. But 2016, the Obama administration put an end to that, capped the volume for the entire industry. And so their business was shifting. They really didn't have in much to replace their workload at their former production facility. And we were growing. We were seeing demand for our products expanding. And so we began talking to them and exploring a relationship to work with them. And we're still in that facility today. We've restructured the relationship, so we've actually hired most of their employees, but it's a lot of the same core folks that were building diesel trucks before, now building electric trucks and building our hubs and our powertrains. And it's been one of the best and smartest decisions we made in hindsight that we could have ever really made to bring these vehicles to production.
Congratulations, Dakota. I mean, manufacturing, and again, we're saying that these vehicles and these systems are easier to manufacture than trucks, but boy, I've seen a lot of truck builders close one plant, go open another, and still have a lot of the same problems because there's just inherent challenges there. So good work. Hey, and I want to ask you about Windrose. Recently, there's been some that there's a Xos-Windrose collaboration, kind of in the go to market side. Can you explain what's emerging there and how that fits with your overall business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned we've been talking about how we originally set out to build Class 8 trucks, and we actually built another prototype. We were ready to bring one to market. And, we saw a lot of interest in the market. I think there's strong commercial demands for it. But as you know, it's challenging to bring something to market, and the capital cost and the tooling cost and ramping up manufacturing and production. And when we were going through some difficult times in the public markets, we decided, let's focus on what's our core, what are the areas we can be truly profitable and scale the business by generating, positive cash flow, positive EBITDA. And so we centered in on step van business and the core things that we're doing today. But we're still interested, and I think the Class 8 market overall is still so attractive for so many reasons. One, the efficiencies that you can obtain on these Class 8 electric platforms are just beyond me, and I think the Windrose product is a perfect testament to that. But there are also a ton of applications. There's probably around 400,000 Class 8 trucks sold every year. There are a ton of applications that are still in that regional haul, short haul, drayage market that are still doing 200, 250, maybe 300 miles a day that are ripe for electrification. And so we began to get to know the Windrose team probably about 3 years ago and started talking to them, exploring, how we maybe work together. Could we leverage some of their powertrain technology in our platforms? And it came down to it, and they were ramping their production. And we said, why don't we become your commercial partner? Why don't we help you distribute your products? We've done it for many, many years. We know how to work with large fleets. We know the expectations around service and support. We've got brick and mortar locations in the key markets in the US. We've got technicians that know how to work on high voltage vehicles. And you've got an incredibly compelling product that candidly, if we tried to build it ourselves, it could take 3, 4 years, tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars. And why don't we kind of think about partnering? And that's what we're doing today. So we've now become their dealer for California. We're actually expanding beyond that into several other states. So we just delivered a truck to Texas. We've got a few more scheduled for California and next month and month after. And yeah, we're supporting them and helping them bring their products to market because we think it's a compelling product. And if we can both win, why not?
Yeah, we do too. I mean, they were in run on less messy metal this last year in 2025 with a truck that, over 18 days saw 5 states, a lot of public charging sites. I mean, they ended up charging at a lot of Walmarts with 350 kilowatt Electrify America. Given what you've learned with respect to the trucking industry, and given a lot of people listen to this are fairly new or have an idea or trying to move forward in the industry, what would be your kind of top 2 or 3 pieces of advice for those trying to do what you've done?
That's a hard question, but I think one thing that comes to mind, and I'm going to probably misquote him, but I refer to one of my mentors who's on our board, a gentleman named Ed Rapp. And Ed's just an incredibly wise individual. He worked at Caterpillar for, I think, almost 40 years, was their CFO and ran several of their different business units. And Ed is always of the opinion that we are constantly learning. And I couldn't agree with him more. I'm 10 years into this industry, and in many ways it's 10 years young. It's really just a start. And I think one of the things that I would remind people is just to stay open-minded and continue to learn, continue to shift the way you think, and be open to trying new things and trying, new possibilities. Because I think the second you start to close off new possibilities, not only do you become the curmudgeon in the room, but you kind of shut down what's possible. And we've seen how much things have evolved, how much we've been able to accomplish in many ways beyond even our own kind of aspirations and ambitions. So just staying open-minded and being really willing to learn, willing to say you don't know and you don't know the answer to it, is probably one of the most important things in this industry, or probably other industries as well. But I think definitely within trucking, there's a lot of shifting tides right now. And I think the latest is this energy crisis that we're now in that is going to dramatically inform the way technology evolves, the way fleets operate, how they pass on those costs to consumers. And so we got to be adaptive, you got to be resilient, but you got to be willing to change your operating model. And so that's something I think I would share with everybody is be open-minded and continue to learn.
Dakota, thank you. This has been really a great discussion, and I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing you down the road somewhere.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for all the deep questions, and for continuing to follow along as we build Xos and keep getting more trucks on the road.
Freight efficiency with NACFE's Mike Rosen Friends.